Hi everybody, I'm Karen Castagnola, the House Studies tutor, and the title of our workshop this morning will be Screen Addiction. The reason I picked this topic and reviewing some of the things in the literature, I was seeing increasing articles and information about people having difficulty with becoming addicted to different technologies for various reasons. And almost every day when we pick up the newspaper or a magazine, we hear something about technology. This was a couple weeks ago. A Times headline article was never offline, and it's an article about Apple bringing out now a watch and what impact this could have on people's lifestyles. So I think this is kind of a constant and evolving thing, that we are interacting with technology in various ways. Last night on the news, there was a public service announcement. There's now a code that you can put into your smartphone if you're going to be driving, to let people know that you are driving and you cannot answer a text at that time. So just another example that we're hearing more and more about technology every day. Some of the causes of screen addiction, just kind of looking at where we are as a society, devices have become cheaper and more portable, so that we're constantly surrounded by some type of device or another. Years ago, this was about 25 years ago, my daughter received a computer as a Christmas gift. It was very large and heavy and expensive. It was difficult to put it all together. There was no portability to it, and we didn't have an internet, so we were kind of limited with what we could do with those types of devices. Now we have devices where we have instant access. They can be used 24 hours a day, as every day of the year. So it has greatly changed the availability of some of the uses that we can do with the screens. In fact, we are almost mandated to use various types of devices. Most people on their job or in their schooling are using computers, smartphones, and different technology on a pretty constant basis. So it's not something that we can really just put away. And as a society, we have really little social experience. If you think about the history of the internet, it hasn't been that long that this has been a factor in our society. So as a society, we really don't have a lot of life experiences in how to deal with some of the challenges that can be posed by different screen devices. And so I think society is a little bit vague about, well, how do we view some of these devices and how do we view their use? And I think that maybe contributes to some confusion and some problems. So screen addiction is defined as an impulse control problem with various subtypes. So we're going to look at some of the subtypes. Sometimes it does require counseling, outpatient treatment, or even inpatient treatment to resolve some of the problems that it causes. Just recently in Pennsylvania, we've had some disturbing events at the Attorney General's office where apparently people were using the internet for online pornography during work hours. Now, whether any of these people had a screen addiction, I don't know. I don't know them, don't know all the circumstances. But this type of activity certainly led to a downside in terms of their employment, social standing, and so forth, and is creating problems at the Attorney General's office. So we can see that problems can start out maybe in a small way but become widespread. We frequently hear on the news of people texting while they're walking, maybe getting into a pedestrian accident or a fall, and people texting while they're driving and getting into even fatal car accidents. So we see some disturbing problems happening involving screens. Some of the types of screen addiction, when I started to read about this, I had thought, well, screen addiction, it maybe is limited just playing too many video games and not getting your schoolwork done and falling behind, which is a very serious problem. But there are many different facets of it, and I was really amazed at what it does cover. And it can include sexting and online sex addiction with pornography, but also chat rooms, social media, and sexting causing problems. Some people become very overly involved with chat rooms and people that they meet online. And so it can become kind of an emotional adultery situation in a marriage. And the online friends become almost more real and more important than the actual family members and friends that the person is dealing with in a real life environment, and has led to divorce, separation, and family problems. Now, this was a situation I was told of that occurred in Pennsylvania a number of years ago, But a woman who did have a background with a mental health problem but was married had met a man online, and she and her husband had a quite substantial bank account. Well, the online boyfriend told her he was a computer genius. He just needed so many thousands of dollars. He was starting a business. And the woman took a large amount of money and went to another state to meet this man. And the family and her husband were very terrified because they didn't know where she was, who this person was, whether or not he could have even been a criminal. So people in these relationships become kind of enthralled with them. It becomes more important than their day-to-day lives, and they can give up their homes, marriage, and jobs just to search out this person that they have met through the internet. Another problem occurs with video games and gaming addiction. And this is especially, can involve people of all ages, but especially teenagers and preteens. And so some teenagers become very involved with video games rather than seeing friends or being involved with sports or extracurricular activities. It becomes an uncontrollable compulsion. And for some parents, maybe they may feel, well, my child's in their room a lot, they're in there every evening, they're doing things on the computer. But if they're on the computer, they're not drinking and driving, maybe they're not with a bad crowd. And so the parent may not always see the downside of being overly involved in video games. But according to the research, 10 to 15% of gamers exhibit signs that meet the criteria for addiction, and these people become enthralled in a fantasy world that's more valuable than the real life world to them. Another area is internet compulsions, and that can occur with gambling. Now, the gambling sites are not controlled, they're offshore, they're illegal, but this has become kind of a billion-dollar industry in our country, people doing illegal gambling. Also, shopping addiction and eBay addiction are causing financial problems. So if you think about years ago when I was a teen, stores were closed on Sundays. Some of them were closed in the evenings. If you wanted to get something, you pretty much had to have a car. The store had to be within walking distance. We had a limited number of choices of stores and even what to buy. But now with the internet, there's almost limited amount of catalogs, products that you can buy 24 hours a day. So it has led to shopping addiction and eBay addiction for some people. One of the difficulties for families in dealing with online gambling and shopping addictions would be that individuals tend to deny or minimize the problem, and it can lead to withdrawal from loved ones, and the person begins to sneak around, lie about their expenses, what they're doing. And so it can be very difficult for the family to even get a handle on the total situation. Most of these people are not getting up one day and saying, well, I'm going to get into gambling, I'm going to lose thousands of dollars, the family's going to be bankrupt, or I'm going to put $20,000 on some credit cards. But these things can become addictive, and they creep up on the individual until they get into some dire circumstances. Now, another type of internet addiction, which I think deals more directly with the college situation, would be the information overload. And this would be the person who cannot stop searching and collecting data. It goes on endlessly to an extreme degree. And it leads to problems because then they never make decisions about what is the most important information, what to put in their paper, how to conclude the project. So this might be a student who's met with the librarian, met with the instructor, the research has all been done adequately, but they just don't stop researching. And then at the end they have to throw something together very hurriedly. On the job, this can lead to reduced productivity because most of the time on the job, if you're given a specific goal, there may be a certain number of days or weeks to produce the report, a certain amount of information that the supervisor may need. So if the supervisor is looking for a 5-page summary of some type of question related to the business, and the employee presents a 20-page document, it may not be at all useful or helpful. So with this data overload, it can lead to also problems on the job and lost productivity. A good thing for students to do, if you tend to feel like I'm really getting overwhelmed, what information do I need? Use some trusted individuals to help you benchmark so that your librarians, your instructors can be very useful in helping you decide when do you have enough information and how do you proceed and how do you use it productively to kind of avoid getting drawn into too much of an information overload. Now, I was looking at a site. This site was developed in order to treat internet addiction. It is presented by a treatment center, but they gave a number of interesting questions which I thought could be used to decide, does an individual have perhaps the beginnings of a screen addiction? Do they feel preoccupied with the internet? They're always thinking about, well, when am I going to get online again? Who's going to be online? What are we going to be chatting about? What's the next video game that we can do? So in order to feel relaxed, they have to keep using the internet for an increasing amount of time every day. When they try to cut back and do other activities, they may become very nervous, irritable, upset, restless, depressed, and so they can't really cut down in a logical way, in a goal-oriented way. And they find when they get online, they may have one thing they want to do, but then they're looking up other things, they're chatting, video games, and so what starts with a 15-minute goal maybe becomes an all-evening session of doing a variety of things on the internet. I think a key is looking at, has the internet activity jeopardized relationships, jobs, educational and career opportunities. So if the person is losing out on these other important aspects of life, then there is a problem developing. Does the person start to lie to conceal the extent of involvement with the internet? So they may be lying about gambling losses, shopping expenses, the amount of time they're spending, the people they're meeting, the types of games they're using. So because of shame and guilt, the person begins to lie to conceal the internet activities from the loved ones. Also, is the internet used to escape from problems, the everyday problems of life or the moods of life, so that this is the person's kind of only relaxation, only coping mechanism? Those can all be clues that a problem is developing. Now, there is treatment available. Psychologists feel that cognitive behavioral therapy is the most effective. Cognitive behavioral therapy can be short-term. It helps the person to change their thinking and belief process, and also sets goals in order to modify behavior. We just recently had a new version of the DSM-4 released. It's now the DSM-5, and this is published by the American Psychological Association. And it looks at various psychological problems. How do we define them? How do we classify people? How do we help people to receive the diagnosis? And they do have a new diagnosis, internet use gaming disorder. We might think, well, why is it important to have a diagnosis? Many times a diagnosis can be used to guide treatment, also to receive reimbursement from health insurance companies and so forth. There now is an inpatient treatment center for internet addiction, and that opened in September of 2013. And it is called a digital detox rehabilitation program, actually teaching the person new ways of thinking, new ways of behavior, how to modify their behavior. Stanford Medical School has been doing research on screen addiction, and they found that 1 in 8 Americans has at least one type of screen addiction. There probably are people that have more than one type, but I thought that was kind of surprising that 1 in 8 people are dealing with this issue. Some of the statistics we find are equally disturbing. They feel that there's especially a problem, of course this is monitored by the people in these societies, in China and South Korea, with up to 30% of younger people having problems with screen addiction. They talked about in one Oriental country, 8 people had died of heart attacks, I guess in video gaming establishments. And there was a killing, a death, a murder related to some type of a gaming issue. In the United States, online gamers, especially the preteens and teenagers, it was found that 17 to 20% of U.S. online gamers may suffer from gaming addiction. And it was kind of interesting, in surveying 18 to 24-year-olds, 77% may suffer from nomophobia, and this means the fear of being without a phone. So just a pervasive anxiety of not having a cell phone or smartphone with them. One of the difficulties in dealing with this, although counselors feel that it is a significant problem, especially for teens and college students, 94% of college counselors have no training in treating screen addiction. Now, hopefully that can be something that can change. We now have this treatment center. They're putting out a lot of information. We're seeing more and more books in the literature dealing with screen addiction. So hopefully counseling and treatment will become more available. But a lot of the literature now coming out, some of the examples, internet addiction, when gaming becomes an obsession, help for parents and children. So a lot of the literature is now gearing at helping to parents to realize it is a problem, and then what can the parent do? Net negotiations, what every parent should know about controlling child's use of technology. So I think parents are becoming a little bit more on board about what's happening with technology and what messages can be given. So can you think about anything that you could do as a student to kind of address the issue and make people more aware of the issue of screen addiction? I know when I was a teenage and college years, there were a lot of problems with drunk driving, and there was a lot of information out, don't ever drink and drive, and parents, teachers, everybody kind of had a uniform message of the dangers of drinking and driving. Sometimes we don't always hear in our society about some of the risks of the different types of screen addiction. So I think one thing you can do as college students, be willing to talk about the problem with other students, that it is an issue, it is harmful to young people, what some of the consequences might be. Your parents may not really be very knowledgeable about the whole situation. So if you can discuss it with siblings, younger cousins, younger friends, I think you may be more credible in saying, well, this can lead to problems, versus maybe an older person bringing up the issue. So just being willing to be aware of the symptoms and presenting the issue to other students and to younger people, I think can be a big help. Also, if you think about in our community, we have a number of facilities that do provide services to teenagers and families. In Altoona, we have for years had a teens shelter, but it was kind of in an out-of-the-way road, and you kind of, I think, had to have a car to get there. Well, recently, that Association of Family and Children's Services has obtained, it sounds kind of morbid, but it really is a beautiful setting, an older funeral home, which was vacant for about a year. They have obtained that, and it's only about a block from Altoona Senior and Junior High School, and it's right across the street from the Altoona Library. So I think, as voters, you can support facilities, you can support funding for mental health services because they're addressing a variety of issues for families and teenagers. I haven't read anything in the paper locally about any groups or agencies addressing screen addiction specifically, but I think it may be something that possibly they might address in the future. So I think voting for mental health funding, voting to support these types of associations, and sometimes they may have opportunities for volunteering, to participate in fundraising, and sometimes they'll even have things like you can donate shampoo, laundry detergent, those household things to the teen centers and the family centers. So I think anything that you can do there out in the community to help support the societies and associations that are providing services to teenagers can help to minimize maybe some of the factors that help teenagers to get into excessive gaming or other types of screen addiction. Does anybody have any comments, questions? That was kind of a quick overview. If you want to get online, you can Google screen addiction. They'll give more information to you. And I do have the information of the treatment center. You can contact me if you would like to have information about their phone number and how to contact the National Treatment Center for Screen Addiction.